Hello, welcome to Exotic Gardening Live with me, Yorkshire Chris. This is the first live stream I've done quite a while. Oh, got a bit of feedback there. Sort out my sound. Go. You can only hear himself once now rather than an echo. So, sorry for that poor start there. I've not done this for a while. But yes, so on this episode or this live stream, we're going to look at what seeds I'm sowing this year for summer colour. And probably more importantly for a lot of people, I'll be answering your questions about winter, about spring, everything to do with exotic gardening. So let's just say who's here at the moment, and I can say hello to a few people. So I just scroll up, I can see hello Daniel Vickers, hello Lindsay, hello Great Northern Exotic Garden, Mark Newman, and Skagius, and Jeff Rebergen. Sorry about that mispronunciation. So let's have a look at what seeds I'm sowing this year. So we got quite a lot of the usual suspects that I grow year after year. Sometimes I've saved seeds, others I actually buy seeds again just to make sure to get some good quality seeds. And I've got lots of new things from seed to try this year. So we'll have a look at those in a second. Hi Angela, thanks for joining us. Let's just see if all the tech's working. So again, I'm here on a laptop, got a green screen behind me, got a little microphone going on, headphones as well, so hopefully I can hear myself, but only once. And hi Linda from Vancouver Island over in Canada. Thanks for joining us. Must be sort of lunchtime over there. So let's have a look. All the tech going, I think, and I can see the questions coming up. Look, there we go. Great Northern Exotic Garden. Hello in Canada. So yeah, I can click on comments as well and select them and put them on the screen so everybody can see the questions that are coming in on the main part of the screen. So it's nice and clear. So we had a couple of questions early in the week when I said I'm doing a live stream. So we'll get to them in a second. But let's first look at what I'm actually growing from seed this year. And as well as that, I'll sort of touch on the other topic that I'm doing this year, which is sort of keeping a track of every single penny I spend on the garden. So my last video, I said I was going to do that. So we're going to basically get a rough total, or a very precise total in my case, of how much it costs to keep my garden going in terms of in seed, plants, soil, anything else that the garden requires throughout the year, and I'll keep a very accurate log. So the last video I talked about buying seeds. I'll go through what seeds they are in this live stream. And that costs, I think, about £47. I've got the exact figure written down somewhere. Quite a lot, but I did buy quite a lot of seeds. And today I've also been out to the garden centre, made a purchase well as seeds, need something to grow them in. I've already got trays that I'll reuse from previous years, but I need some growing media. I've bought some seed sowing compost as well, so I'll talk about that to go through the live stream. Who's just joined us? We've got Sarah Newman, Sam McDonough, Ninja Tree Drinker, and Mr. Chuffy. Welcome everybody, and hopefully you'll find this informative and maybe entertaining as well as we go through this live stream. So the seeds I bought, I often buy seeds from various different places. One of the main places I buy seeds from is Chilton Seeds, but there's loads of other places to get seeds. Obviously, lots of really nice exotic seeds you can get from local garden centres, Thompson Morgan seeds, Derby seeds, and things like that. You can get Toucan Tropicals, do good seeds. Mike Clifford does lots of really unusual bespoke seeds as well, which you'll find on Instagram and Facebook, X as well, and eBay. So those places you can get lots of really interesting seeds. And then there's Grow Paradise do their seed club as well, so you can get lots of good seeds from that as well. But the seeds I bought last week all came from Chilton Seeds, and we'll go through them and let me know what you think about my choices. And as well as these seeds, I have, like I said, saved seeds from plants in the garden from last year, such as McCannas and things like that, which will be germinating in the next month or two, and hopefully have nice plants for planting out in summer months. 'Cause it won't be long, believe it or not, before it's nice, warm, sunny weather returns, and we can actually really enjoy being outside in the garden. This is an exciting part of the year as well because the days are getting longer. Start the process of sowing seeds now, and over the next few weeks, have seedlings germinating. And always, it's always a fantastic feeling when you go into the greenhouse or you look on your windowsill, look at those seed trays that you've watered and kept nice and warm, and see those first seedlings, first green shoots appear out of the compost. So the seeds I'm growing this year, growing some amaranthus. So I've always got amaranthus that self-seed in the garden anyway, year after year. But I thought I'd buy a couple of different ones this year. So as well as the normal purple ones I have, the red flowered ones I have every year in the garden, gone for one called Hot Biscuits, which I did try before, but I didn't have a lot of luck with it. And Hot Biscuits is more of a beigey coloured flower spike on this one, grouping flowers, very very small flowers, lots of hundreds of flowers together, and it's more like a woolly sort of flower. And Amaranthus Hot Biscuits, and that is one that I'll be sowing, not for a couple of months yet, because you get lots of tiny little seeds. I'll probably just broadcast these where I want them to actually germinate in the garden and grow rather than grow them in seed trays. Next one I'm going to grow is actually, it's just a test actually, because I think I grow this one. I think this is the one that I self seeds every year, but I've bought it again just to see if it's the same one that I have in the garden, because over the last few years I've shown my garden videos and people have said, what is the really tall amaranthus that you've got in the garden that grows at a metre and a half tall, so 5, 6 foot tall, very dark purple flowers and reddish green leaves, and it's a really tall striking plant. And I always say it's a giant form I got from Chiltern Seeds 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago now. So I've bought one which I think is the same one, and we'll compare this against the ones that will self-seed in my garden and see if it's the same plant. And that is Amaranthus hybridus Opio. So that is one that will, hopefully, it says it's the giant form of it. So see if it's the same as the one I've got in my garden. And again, I'll be just broadcasting this around the garden. I'm doing a few in seed tray just so I can make sure they'll get it mixed up with the ones already in the soil outside that have self-seeded from flowers. The next one we have for summer colour is one that I've collected seeds for every year, which is the spider flower Cleome. And I've bought some more seeds just to make sure I've got some good quality seeds, because sometimes you collect seeds, and if they've been frosted or they've been sort of gone a bit sort of mildewy, mouldy, and they don't germinate from your own seeds that you might have collected quite late on in the year. So I've got some backup seeds here, spider flowers, and I'll be sowing them very soon, because they do take quite a while to get to a decent sized plant. So sort of February into early March is a really good time to sow these. You can sow them later, and they will, germinate in spring in the ground from previous year's plants as well. But if you want to get good plants established early, then sow them now and into March. Got a Californian poppy, which many people grow as an annual. Normally it's the orange flowers, but I've gone for one called Red Chief, and this is hopefully a very sort of dark red flower, which will look really good in my dry part of the arid garden. Again, I'll broadcast these seeds. I'll just let them grow, hopefully in the gravel areas, and see them come up pretty soon. Hopefully they'll flower in summer. So that is the Californian poppy Red Chief. And I grew quite a few nice tobacco plants last year, and they grew so easy from seed, really, really easy. And I've got a couple of different types this year from seed. Last year I grew green tinged flowered one. This year I'm growing the stunning tall tobacco plant Nicotiana sylvestris, which I've grown before, and this can be 1.5 meters tall, long white trumpet-like flowers, and again has a nice or interesting scent, especially on an evening. So this will be more of a statuesque plant in the garden rather than the smaller green pinned flowers that we had last year. And these are so easy from seed. You get lots of seeds in a packet normally. Like these, yeah, sounds like there's quite a lot in there, probably a couple of hundred in there. And that grows very easy from seed. Plant it out after the last frost and it should grow away very quickly and make very large plants that will flower in the first year because it is a half hardy annual. So it germinates, grows, and flowers and sets seeds all within 1 year. Next one we have is one called the Perfume series of tobacco plants. I'm going to see if I can find that. I'm going to do some multitasking now. Rather than describe it, I'll show you a picture. So let's see if I find it. Okay, let's go. See if we can get green for you. There you go. So this is a really deep, plummy purple flower, and I think this looks really, really nice. It's not a tall one, and it's the first time I've grown this tobacco flower. So this is one called Perfume Deep Purple. And I think we can agree that's quite an unusual shade, and it should look really good in sort of the semi-shady areas in the garden. Hide that for a. And the next one we've got Spanish flag. I always grow Spanish flag. It's a great twining climber with really interesting flowers that go from red, orange, and then into cream and into white. It's quite slow to flower, so it's sort of, from early August all the way through to the first frost. You can get it to flower in July if you set the seeds early. So I'll be sowing the seeds for that pretty soon. You can sow the seeds from January all the way through to April. I think in the last few years I sowed the seeds in April and it flowered in August. Hoping if I sow it sort of a bit earlier, but not too early because it doesn't like cold weather at all, then we should see it flower in August, July as well, a bit earlier. And that's a fantastic climber, and it'll go to about 1.5 meters, 2 meters, maybe a bit taller. And I like to get it to scramble through other plants so it can grow through taller tobacco plants. It can grow through the bamboos, other plants that it can find through in the garden that can offer it some support. Again, it's an annual here. It can be perennial if you have frost-free locations. I grow it as an annual. That's Spanish flag, Familia lobata. Got some seeds from the garden from last year as well, which I'll be sowing as well. Then we move to some different sort of colourful statuesque plants, not grown for the flowers, but actually grown for the foliage. And these are, of course, the castor oil plants, ricinus. So these are poisonous seeds, and it does say that on the packet. It used to just say poison in previous years on Chiltern seeds, but this year it says seed is highly toxic, which is very true. So careful around these. And I've got the Zanzibar and I've also got the New Zealand purple. So I've got the red purple leaved one and I've got the big large Zanzibar with the big green leaves with fantastic size, and it really sort of, you know, stand out from the other plants in the garden because it's got such big leaves, grows so quickly, easily 3.5 meters tall by the end of the year. Move to a plant I have not grown before, but I have seen it. It was on Gardeners World a few years ago, and I've seen it um, in a glass house somewhere. I can't quite remember. And this is the toothache plant, electric daisy. I'm not growing this really for its exotic look. It's not particularly exotic. It looks just like any daisy-like flower, but it's got the incredible sort of ability to feel like electric shock when you sort of if you just eat it basically. But we'll be looking into this further in the year when we grow this, and we'll sort of see if it really does live up to its name of toothache plant or electric daisy in terms of giving you that buzz feeling in the mouth. So we'll see that later on in the year. And that is a hardy annual that'll be sowing sort of in March and April time. Next one I've got, and again, they sell seeds in my garden, and I've collected seeds for this, but I've got a pack here as a backup again, and that is the Tifonia, and this is Tifonia torch, so the tall Mexican sunflower, fantastic orange flowers, beautiful orange flowers. You can get the creamy ones, the yellow ones, but I think the straight orange ones is the best form of Tifonia. Really nice plant. And I found it grows much taller than it says on the packet. The packet says 1.2 meters. It easily gets to 2 meters by the end of the year in my garden. I think there's lots of nutrition in the soil, and it really appreciates that. And it flowers all over the plant. It's not like a regular sunflower where you get one big head of a flower. This you get hundreds of smaller flowers, but still pretty big daisy-like flowers of beautiful orange colour. So bees, butterflies absolutely adore this one as well. It's a great one to try if you've not tried it before. It can be a little bit temperamental. Once it's germinated, it can sort of dampen off quite easily. But if you give it some decent ventilation, don't let it get too cold when it's just germinated, it will do well. And as soon as you get it in the ground, once you've transplanted it from a plug or a module or a pot into the ground, it will grow away really strongly, sort of in June time. Then I bought a lot of seeds. I've still got 6 packets here to go through, so I think I've spent my money well. 'Cause I've got a large selection of colourful, mainly annuals, mainly flowers, but like we said, we've seen some of them are sort of architectural leaves as well. The next couple are zinnias. So we've zinnia elegans Binary Giant series, and I've gone for one coral colour, and then I've gone for State Fair as well, which is a mixed colour of zinnias. These are large zinnias, big sort of double daisy-like flowers, but the butterflies still like these as well. They can get in there and enjoy the nectar from these. And they are just bright, cheerful flowers for the garden, and really nice annuals that I like to grow every single year for that really sort of vivid colour in the garden. And the last few, we've got a couple of sort of little herbs or vegetables, which will add a bit of different leaf colour in the garden. So we've got called Scarlet Emperor or Orach, Orach, and that is like a tall sort of purplish leafed herb, really. So it's one I've grown before, and it's just nice for a bit of foliage contrast, not the flowers at all, and it is edible as well. So that is Orach Scarlet Emperor. Growing that pretty soon. And the other one, which I've grown last couple of years, and I found it to be sort of a really nice, good doer, sort of as a replacement from Coleus or Solenstomum, easy to grow than those, is Perella Red or Shiso, Perella fructescens. And this is basically a very dark purple, almost black-leaved foliage plant that's grown actually as a vegetable or a herb, but it's just a nice contrast. It's like a dark-leaved form of Coleus, but it's a bit tougher than Coleus, so it's easier to grow, I find, and it germinates quicker as well. So that is Perella Red. So then the last few, we have a couple of Angelicas, which are biennials, so they will grow their leaves in the first year, flower in the second year. And the leaves are quite interesting, quite nice leaves. I think we've got a picture of that. See if I can find it. We've got Angelica sylvestris ebony, and also we've got Angelica gigas Korean Angelica. Find that. As well as interesting leaves, we have the very nice flower heads in the second year, so something to look forward to. Something, I've been disappointed with the last few years is every year I'm trying to grow echiums, which are fantastic flowers from Madeira, and they, beautiful blue, purple flowers, or sometimes white or red flowers, huge spires of these flowers. And again, these are mainly biennials here. And if they don't get through the first winter, you don't get to flower. And I've had a couple of cold spells this winter where I've had -5, -6, and it killed off my echiums. Again, I won't get to see them flower. With the Angelica, then they are hardy, so they'll get through the winter and I will see them flower, touch wood, next year. So let's see if I can show you what that looks like. Go. So that's Angelica gigas, the Korean Angelica. Got a dark purple umbellifer flower. So you might think it's not the most exotic thing, but I think it's very architectural in the garden, and it's actually described here as architectural exotic appearance, as shiny green, much divided leaves, and then the crimson purple florets form themselves in very distinctive tight heads, whilst undeniably umbellariferous are to a greater or lesser extent spherical in shape, giving the general impression of chunks of cricket balls supported handsomely on strong stems. So that's quite a description Chiltern Seeds have given it. So I'll look forward to growing that one from seed and hopefully seeing it flower next year. Then the last one is something I've never heard of. I was scrolling through Chiltern Seeds and I came across something that sounded intriguing. I'll try to pronounce it. It is Pyrengeshoma palmata. Yellow wax bells, and it has little yellow flowers, but I wasn't drawn by the flowers when I saw the picture. It was the foliage. I think the foliage of this looks really interesting. So again, let's see if I can find this and I can show you what this looks like because it is different from a lot of foliage plants, very distinctive leaves. Looking at this. So here we go. Let's put that on screen. So this is it. It looks sort of a jagged leaf. And what's also great about it is it'll grow in shadier positions as well. So this will be great as an understory plant under the big leaved plants that will grow really tall. This can grow under those plants and still have sort of different unusual foliage as a contrast. That is all the different things I'm growing from seed this year. Most of them I've grown before, but some new ones and some different varieties of plants I've grown before. And I think, if I start sowing them now, I'll have something to sow pretty much every week from now all the way through to May. Because the last things I sow are the castor oil plants, the ricinus, start in April. And I'll continue sowing into May, depending how much space, because that's a lot of seeds. Start off in little seed trays. When they get bigger, you've got to move them into bigger seed trays or modules or pots. Space just gets more of a premium as plants get bigger and bigger, but there's no more space to put them in. So other plants will have to move out the greenhouse and have windowsills into the garden. So we frost to hopefully go in early April, so the sort of half hardy plants can go out, more space for tender seeds. A lot of these plants are pretty tender, so the ricinus that are pretty tender and don't want frost at all. So what do you think about my seed selections? Are you growing any of these? Have you grown any of the unusual ones that I've mentioned? And do you have any tips for growing them? And we'll start answering your questions in a sec. So let's have a look if we've had any messages since I've been rambling on about all the seeds there. Have a look. Okay, so Mr. Chuffy's spent £42 with Mike Clifford seeds. Very good. Like I mentioned, Mike Clifford, he's got some great unusual seeds from plants that he grows in his garden. So really interesting selection you can get from Mike Clifford. I believe he opened his garden charity every summer as well, so it's a great garden on the south coast. Have a look at. Okay, so we have a question mark, so there must be a question here from Great Northern Exotic Garden. Question, as you can see on the screen, is do you ever sow seeds directly into beds? Last year, my self-seeded amaranthus did much better than the ones I grew in the greenhouse, so thinking of sowing directly again. Exactly this. This is what happens with my amaranthus. It self-sows really easily. Once you've had it flower in your garden, normally self-sows year after year, and you shouldn't need to buy that variety again. And I found, like you, that if you let it do that, it might be a week or two or 3 or 4 later than if you've obviously sown them indoors in the greenhouse when you can control the heat. And so therefore you can sow it exactly when you want to sow them in spring. But I find the plants, they catch up time-wise and they grow better and stronger if they just broadcast or self-sow themselves where they want to grow in the garden. Obviously, if you've got big, chunky, heavy soil that's not been sort of broken up at all, it can be hard for the seeds to germinate, or they might all fall down a crack and you get like a line of seeds growing, big area where there's no seeds germinating at all. You've got decent soil, might have a bit of a gravel soil or gravel path or something like that where seeds will germinate very easily in, which can be transplanted. Then I find that they grow a lot better than if you've grown them in seed trays. That's not the case for a lot of things, but I found that the case for amaranthus. Quite a few of the really small seeds and the ones that have a little bit of sort of hardiness as well as some of these half hardy ones. But yeah, amaranthus is a great one to let it seed where it wants. Um, so that's the first question we've got there. Lindsay Kane Wally, you've got the hot biscuit amaranthus as well. See how that grows this year. Question from Stanley Gladstone, and this is about Manihot Grammii. Leaves curling up, falling off south-facing window. Any advice appreciated? At this time of year, it's probably because it's too dry, or it's not being watered at all, or there's a radiator very close by, which will cause humidity to be very low near that area, and therefore it causes the leaves to dry out much quicker. So it's probably down to heat or too dry or not enough water. And as we're coming into spring now, obviously the light levels are increasing, so you can start watering plants that you've not watered too much over winter. So we can start thinking about watering houseplants rather than sort of once every month or when they're completely dry, which I like to do for most houseplants in winter, maybe to having to water them every couple of weeks, every week, depending obviously on your conditions. But watering can increase as light levels increase. Sam had problems with self-saved seeds not germinating. Again, pardon me, I've had them germinate really well from seeds that I've collected myself and they've self-seeded in the garden. But also, likewise, sometimes I have the seeds where they come in like little clusters, like in a long seed case, a bit like a wallflower, a bit like a pea, and then you open it up and you have these little seeds in the pod, basically. If that pod's got a bit wet in autumn before you've harvested the seeds, or they've got a bit, too cold and wet and soggy and a bit moldy, then the seeds might not be viable. Sometimes the seeds need to ripen a bit, the pods need to go very dry, sort of brownish greyish colour rather than green before you harvest the seeds, or they're viable to germinate anyway. Question from Nick Craggs. Concern growing riciness when you have young children at all? Yes, obviously there's dangers everywhere and plants can be dangerous. We talked about riciness being very poisonous if you put the seeds, if you eat the seeds especially, but the leaves, the stems, all parts of the plant are. But I find as long as you don't put them literally on plates, I think most people, most young children don't start picking plants and eating them unless they've been highlighted as fruit and veg, very obvious things. So, and obviously most things that are poisonous, not everything, but most things that are poisonous don't taste nice or taste bitter, awful. whole point of poison on of harmful plants is stop, predators, herbivores eating them and damaging them. So yes, they can be an issue, and if you want to be, omit them completely from the garden so that children have not got any chance of eating them, then that's down to personal preference. But I find that, well, with my children, I grow the plants mainly not right at the front of borders. I grow them in the middle or at the back because they are tall plants, so they're not literally at touching the at the paths. But you'll find these plants also, all over sort of stay-at-home gardens, parks. I've seen these seaside in sort of on the south coast in parks displays as well. So they grow in public areas all over the country, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of other poisonous, toxic plants that are grown. Obviously, ricinus is got well known as being very, very poisonous, and it is one of the most poisonous ones that you can easily find in gardens and things. So people are aware of it more than other plants, but even things like daffodils, crocuses are poisonous well, but we, less careful probably handling those sort of plants. That's a whole other topic talking about plants. Generally, no, as long as, my behaves not sort of picking all the plants, apart from berries that they're allowed to have, like the blackberries and raspberries that do grow inside the garden, which no are safe to eat. And children grow up then more aware of the different plants, learn about them, and they'll keep away from the poisons. Obviously, plants are also poisonous to cats, dogs, people's pets, and well, different types of plants. You have to be mindful of that as well. Okay, have a look. Next question from Nick as well is about the arid section of the garden, and it wants to know if I've added anything to the soil that I when I planted the plants. Well, generally not. So the whole area of the garden was very heavy clay. I broke this up with a fork, so dug it over, added lots of gravel and mixed this in with the topsoil. And then I did a layer of at least 15 to 30 centimeters of pure grit basalt, I think 8 millimeter or 10 millimeter black basalt, or in some areas I use some sort of pea shingle as well. It again is about sort of 10 millimeter in diameter. Nice gritty open medium, and it's great for drainage. Obviously it's very poor on nutrition. Once the plants grow through that, they've got a good root run through that and then into the soil below where they can get the nutrients that they need. Because a lot of these plants, don't need tons of nutrition. Some do, but not all of them do. But the main thing is keeping the base of the plants and the crown of the plants, the base where the roots go into the ground, really sort of free drainage in those areas, nice and dry, especially of winter. That is something that's been very difficult over the last winter because it's been exceptionally wet. Really, really, been mild at times. It's been really wet at times as well. So we've had localized flooding across the country. I think it's been January is extremely wet here, and mine's a bit foggy, but I think it was November, December is extremely wet as well. Have to look back at the stats, but it's been very wet, and without all the extra gravel and grit in the arid bed, I think a lot of plants would have really, really struggled to get through this winter because it's so wet. But yeah, basically, you might be a bit hesitant about planting into pure gravel, but you've got to remember the plants you buy have got compost or soil around the roots, and once you've planted them in, a depth of the pot might be 10 centimeters, 15 centimeters. Once that's in the gravel, it hasn't got a long way to go for the roots to go through the bottom of the where the pot was into the gravel, into the topsoil underneath that. So it does anchor itself into the ground and gets the water and nutrients it needs further down without it being waterlogged in winter further up at the base of the plant. That makes no solanums this year, Mr. Chuffy. I do like growing solanums, but I've got a couple in the greenhouse that I've kept from last year as cuttings, and I will be growing them this year from the overwintering plants. Although of green fly have been attacking all my plants in the greenhouse over the last few weeks. Warmed up a little bit, so I need to get on top of the green fly in the greenhouse. Linda says my Tifonias grow over 12 feet high. Yeah, they grow really tall, so they're not meant to. Oh, they don't. Packets normally say like 1.2 meters up to 1.5 meters. Yeah, easily can get to 2 meters, 2.5 meters tall. Great, great plants. Like I said, the bees and butterflies love them and they flower their socks off from July all the way through to November when the first frosts come. Uncle Buck asked about rice nuts again. Like I said, all the plant is poisonous. Seeds, flowers, stems, the leaves, the roots, it's all poisonous, but I think the poison is mainly concentrated in they're the most poisonous part, and you don't want to eat them at all. Touching them, I would wash your hands after touching them. Don't, don't touch the, especially seeds are dry basically, so they're not too bad. But if you've got the actual plant in your garden and you get sap if you cut a leaf open or a stem, bruise it, and you get sap moisture onto your skin and then your eye or into your mouth, that's not a good idea. So wash your hands straight away, handling plants and the well. Next question we have is from Mick, and Mick's got a 3-year-old palm in a planter in Newcastle upon Tyne. And do you think the winter will have killed it? Well, it really depends what type of palm tree it is. If it's Trachycarpus fortunei, probably won't have killed it. If it's anything else, there's a chance it could have died this winter. If it's a European fan palm, the Chemerops, it's probably fine. But if it's a Washingtonia, or a tender type of palm tree, then it could have died this winter. Like I said, we've had -5, -6 here. It's not been super cold winter. It's not been a very bad winter for most people, but we did get -5, -6. A couple of days where it struggled to get above. Newcastle generally colder than here, so you probably had those temperatures or lower as well this winter. The small plant in a pot, not a trachea or a chame, then it might have suffered a lot. So, oh. Next question is from Rich, and this is: what is the name of the begonia you have in your garden that's full of red flowers, please? So I have got lots of different types of begonias, but the one that has lots of smaller red flowers, that's actually flowering now in my greenhouse, is Begonia fuchsioides, which is the fuchsia flowered begonia. So it's like a general begonia. This has lots of normally pinky white flowers, but I've got the red form as well. Beautiful plant, very, very easy from cuttings and divisions. And I've got lots of little plants growing really well, grown all through winter, and it's flowered all through winter as well. So it's been fantastic in the greenhouse. Kept my greenhouse cooler this year because I'm trying to save money. It's very expensive heating a big space. I've got them in heated propagators, but the air temperature in the greenhouse is between 6 and 8 degrees all through winter. Obviously, when it's a warm, sunny day, it will warm up higher than that, but the lowest it goes most of the time is sort of 6 to 8 degrees. Like I said, I've got some in propagators, so the bottom heat will be more like 18, 20 degrees, but the air temperature heats the air with the thermostat is 6 degrees. That's kept most things alive. I'll do a video, soon showing what the greenhouse actually looks like approach the start of spring, because we've had lots of dark, dingy months. So even though things have kept alive, they've really struggled because there's not much light in there, so it's hard for them to grow when there's not much light. So we'll see what plants looking good and not so good in the greenhouse soon. Next question we have is from Richard Selby. And Richard asks, my colocasias didn't grow much outdoors last summer. I brought them into an unheated conservatory over winter, but the leaves curled up. Still alive though. You think they need more heat and water? This is normally shocking in the first instance. So when you dig up colocasias and move them anywhere, very often they will curl up and lose pretty much all the leaves apart from the newest leaf because they don't like all the roots being cut. It's just a shock reaction. But like it's happened to yours, they're still alive and they're probably going to be fine. Probably that shock, and then because they've gone into winter, they've not really had the heat to quickly recover and grow. Whereas if you do this in spring and summer, move them about, yes, they might look rubbish for a week or two, grow new leaves. In winter, they sort of look rubbish for a while and very, very slowly recover when the heat, the light increases. Probably that. And they want to be pretty, pretty dry over winter as well, especially if they've had all the roots cut by being dug up. So heat and water will definitely see if they're alive, and they will see if they'll grow away. Be careful in the watering. Introduce more heat and light first, and then increase the water once you see a leaf or two strongly growing away. Okay, question from Mr. Chuffet is about tree ferns. Talking about watering them and how my drip system works. So yeah, basically my irrigation system for some of my tree ferns, not all of them. Some of them are set up on a outdoor pipe, so a continuation basically of the indoor pipe system. The outdoors, a nice rigid plastic pipe that goes round the side of the garden, and then I put some taps off this, so it's basically outdoor taps. And off the outdoor taps, I've got some outdoor pipe irrigation system, so a flexible PVC pipe and wind around different plants, up tree ferns, and has a little dripper on the top. When I turn on a tap in the garden, it will basically send out water down all the different little outlets through the little drippers or little mini sprayers in the garden. I have these in the top of many of the tree ferns so I can turn on the tap for a while, let it get nice and moist, let the water run down the tree fern trunk, keep it nice, high humidity, allows plants to thrive by being nice and moist. Last year I had an issue with a pipe and I didn't have that really working for much of the year, so I used the watering can, water them all by hand. And the ones close to the house, most of them are right at the bottom of the garden, but the ones close to the house in the shadier position, I do water by hand or hose pipe throughout the year, but obviously especially summer months. But yeah, outdoor irrigation is great, especially if you like long holidays abroad and things like that. So you're not at home very often. You have timers as well, and you can water your garden remotely. Can be expensive to set up, depending how big and complicated the system is. Save you hours of watering if you don't want to spend hours in the garden watering. But I like to be out as well, seeing what the garden's doing when I'm watering and relaxing. Hi, Richard. And next question we've got is from Lindsay. This is, have you ever tried seeds from Plant World Newton Abbot? Been there a few times on holiday and there are some unusual ones. I have been to Newton Abbot a long time ago, but I think I visited Plant World actually, but I was only a very young child when I went, and I've not grown seeds from Plant World, so that's not a place I'm from. Maybe I have to try them out, have a look if they've got a website and see what unusual seeds they have. Next question, quite an important question. This really is about some of the less hardy palm trees. This is from Nick again. Have you completely given up on Washingtonias and Phoenixes? I can't help being sucked into the BMO offers and think it's chucking good money after bad. And this is, yeah, you often see in garden centres and especially DIY stores, B&M and B&Q and things like that. You get these plants. Normally, you got Phoenix canariensis, tall stretch ones, but they look nice and impressive and not too expensive. And again, same with Washingtonias, you can have multi-stemmed ones where there's lots of individual palms in the same pot, or you might have one stout trunk with big fan-shaped leaves with those curly ends, filaments on the leaves, and the great palms and the cheapest palms you normally can find because they grow so quickly. Those two, especially in terms of palms, I mean palms are pretty slow growing, but in terms of pounds. Relatively speaking, Washingtonia is very fast growing. You can get a decent sized plant in 2 or 3 years from seed, which is very difficult to achieve with any other palm UK. And yes, they're not hardy for most of us. Obviously, you might be watching this live stream from a very warm, inner London city garden or the south coast, or you might be watching this from Spain or from Florida or somewhere like that where it's very warm and tropical. And yes, you can get away with growing phoenixes and Washingtonia palms very easily, no protection, and they'll grow into absolutely massive plants. Most of the UK, they are summer bedding plants, or they'll get through mild winters. Bigger they get, the hardier they get to some extent, but there is a finite limit to this. There are some very large specimens down south, in London especially, and the south coast. And there's a few sort of like in the Thames Estuary as well, that sort of area, really good specimens. I have randomly a good sized Phoenix canariensis in my front garden, and I've not protected it this winter, and it's showing no damage. So it's had -6 again. It's had -7, -8 in the past. It's had lots of snow on it. I've had it in the front garden. What is it now? 6, 7, 8 years? It's been quite a while. It's got through the Beast from the East in 2018. It's had all the cold weather since, 2017, 2018, and it's fine. It's a bit of an enigma. It's a bit of a strange one how it survived, but it's in the front garden. It's near bamboos. It's got some shelter, and it gets the early morning sun. It's got east, south sun, and west. It's very open at the front garden. What I'm trying to say is it's not shaded from any direction. It gets sun all day long. That really helps in the winter months, especially. So if it's been a frosty night and then it's sunny in the morning, that frost can quickly disappear, and it's really helped that one get through. Washingtonia I had for years and years in pots, brought into the garage or the greenhouse when it was even smaller, and then brought it out for the summer, and it grew well in pots. As soon as I put it in the ground, the first winter it was only -2, -3, and it already looked like it had died. So it wasn't even especially cold, and it heated it basically. So yes, it can take -3, -4, -5 under cover at a push, but if it's actually exposed to those temperatures in the ground, then the open ground really, really struggles. If you get one to get through some mild winters, build up into a big beefy trunk, defoliate and come back from that, again, it's really only it's on the edge of hardiness for most people in on beyond hardiness, most of us, to be honest. So it's not one that I would buy as a permanent part of the garden. And my phoenix in the front garden planted out basically as might get 5, might even get 10 years out of it, which would be a decent sized plant for a cold winter. Under no illusions that it's a long term plant. Nice Jabea and trackies near it, which will take over when the day comes when the phoenix dies. But now it's going against the odds and surviving. So it's worth trying these things if you've got a really good climate. But I wouldn't spend a lot of money on a Washingtonia. Hi Derek, Chester Palm, Garden UK. You've got a nice 4 foot tree fern coming from Seagraves. Good luck with that. I hope it does well for you. It's this time of year you get lots of new tree ferns imported into the country, and it's probably the best time to get them. As soon as they land in the country, you don't want to buy a tree fern that's been basically they come as logs, basically, without any obvious roots, not in any soil or anything. Quite often with no foliage at all. Um, but you want to buy them as soon as they arrive in the first few weeks and months, rather than at the end of the season where they might have been too dry for too long, not being watered enough. You want to get them as soon as you can, look after them, keep them properly watered, saturate them as much as you can, and watch the leaves unfurl. And normally they're fantastic. Best way to buy them, and the cheapest way to buy them, rather than a potted plant, kept at least probably a season that really roots into a pot. Better to buy them as basically logs in spring or whenever they arrive. Sometimes they do arrive in autumn. Normally it's spring when they arrive. And as we know, the cost of tree ferns has literally gone through the roof over the last sort of 10 years or so. So when I first bought my tree ferns, they cost between, I think there was 60, £18 a foot, and now they're sort of 50, £60 a foot, if not more. So they've sort of tripled in price at least over the last sort of 10 years or so. So extremely expensive plants to buy now. Amazing plants to have in the garden. As long as you look after them, they're very statuesque, beautiful, exotic looking fronds on them, quite prehistoric looking. Need a lot of moisture. Ideally, have them in shade. Fantastic plants to get, but they're not the hardest of plants. You do need to protect them in very cold weather, but well worth it in the garden. Really great for shady areas and partial shade as well. Have a look. Next question is from Richard, and Richard is got a question about tree ferns. Well, two new croziers, so two new leaves which have gone black, and had two which were cut on arrival, but it's still reflush. Can't see many other knuckles. Again, this depends when plant arrived in the UK, how long you've had it. So generally speaking, I would say it'll be fine. It will just flush in spring, get lots of new leaves forming. Sort of May time is when they normally flush. Okay, but they can be out of sync and flush at any time once they've arrived in the UK in the first year. Might be straight away, might be delayed, and might not flush until August, September time. Generally speaking, once established, it's sort of in spring into April, into May, into June when they flush new leaves. Sometimes you get some black ones that might have been frosted off, they might have been damaged or something like that. As long as it's not got orange goo coming out the top, or it's been absolutely bone dry and it's a very old plant that's not been watered for like over a year or so, it should be fine. It's without knowing the full details, it's hard to say, but generally speaking, they're pretty hard in terms of, when they've been kept on lorries and things and then brought into Garnison. As long as they've not been absolutely frozen days at a time, they should be fine. Next question we have from Tom HD. Do you have any Wagyu Princeps hybrids? And if so, are they planted? Yes, I do have Wagyu Princeps hybrids and the other way around as well. All of them, I think, let me think. Yeah, and they're all still in pots, I think. Things any in the ground. Really nice leaves on these. So hopefully the really distinctive Trachycarpus palms. So you've got the bluish look of the Princeps and the smaller, stiffer leaf of the Uranus palm. So and it should be very hard to cross. So I've got a few feelings that I've had, and they're into pots that I've gone into bigger pots. They've had quite a few years now, and hopefully find space for one or two of these and plant them out, and we can compare them to the true Trachycarpus species, see how they compare. Next question is from Sussex Tropical Gardening. Can you cut the suckers off a Trachycarpus European fan palm without any adverse effects? Okay, so I'm going to deconstruct what I think with what palm we're talking about here. The Trachycarpus is one type of palm from China mainly, and the European fan palm is the Chemerops palm or Chami or Kami palm, which does sucker a lot. So I think you mean the Chemerops humilis palm, and this does sucker. You can remove, if you want to have one stem on this rather than letting it naturally suck and have like a more of a bushy sort of palm, you can cut off the side shoots or the side palms that are growing and just keep the main stem, the main trunk going upright, most dominant one, with no ill effect to the palm. That's totally fine to do so. The ones that you cut off, the side shoots, very, very hard for them to get them to root again. You very rarely get them to come off with any roots. It's much better to really, if you're just trying to concentrate to get the look of a single stem palm on the Trachycarpus, on the Hemerops palm, then you're concentrating all the energy on that main stem, and basically I'll just cut the side trunks off and not try to propagate, not try to root those side stems. Some people have done it, but it's pretty slow to get the roots on them. It's easier just to buy a much smaller specimen or to even grow them from seed if you want lots of smaller Rops palms. Yeah, you can cut off the side shoots and let the main trunk grow. I've done that with one of mine in the arid part of my garden, where I've got one with a decent sized trunk now. Looks more like a Drachycarpus than a Rops palm because I've cut off the side shoots. I can see where the confusion is there with the naming palms. Drachycarpus don't have side shoots, one big stem, whereas the Chemops, Hamrops or Shamrops, however you want to pronounce it, is a multi-stemmed tree generally. I have a grow. You've got some money, 30th birthday, and you're going to grow a cycad. Any tips on how not to kill it? Well, how not to kill it? You can grow it in a great big tub and keep it frost-free over winter by bringing it indoors. It doesn't need to have any light over winter. You can bring it into a carriage or a pretty much frost-free greenhouse, and it will be fine. Or you can grow it in the ground in some locations. I have risked mine in the ground. It's a decent sized plant, and I just cover it over in winter with either straw or a sleeping bag or a blanket or some sort of cover over it, and it gets through. I had it 12, 13, 14 years, and had it in the garage in winters for many years, and then it's out in the ground now for 5, 6 years. Come through every winter without an issue. It can die. It's not a hardy plant. Anything under -5 and it's going to struggle. Anything lower than -10 will probably kill it. So again, depends on your temperatures like where you live. But it's hardier than it's hardier than a phoenix palm, but not much. So it's definitely not one long term unless lots of protection every winter. Or grow it in a pot, keep it watered, very well watered in the growing season, so sort of May, June, all the way through to August, September. I keep it well watered, and it's more chance of flushing and growing new leaves. And then bring it under cover for winter. And you can grow it as a house plant or a conservatory plant as well, but they do get pretty big and they're very stiff leaves that can be a bit scratchy, and it is very poisonous as well. I think so for cats as well as people talking about earlier. I just thought pointing that out. So we've got quite a few more questions, but before we do that, I better go back to the questions people have asked early in the week on YouTube and Facebook. I did say we're doing this live stream. If you've got any questions, comments below. So got a couple, didn't get many then. I think most people have waited for this live stream. I'll just go back to them and we'll answer those questions. I do like to keep these live streams to an hour maximum, and we have basically had that hour. It's gone so quick, but I will probably extend it a few more minutes while I get through these questions. Let's have a look. Phone down here rather than using the computer screen, and I will just see what questions we had. So on Facebook, we had an important question from Charlie Phillips. Hi, Charlie. And that is about the seed, which we have gone through, and of course, how much money I spent. So thanks for reminding me. So as I said on the seeds, about £45. Today I bought some compost, some Levington's peat-free seed sowing compost. Got the receipt in my pocket here. Today on compost, I have spent £20.97. For that £20.97, I got 3 bags. So compost is getting more and more expensive. And this isn't obviously multi-purpose compost, which you can get for a cheaper price in larger bags. This is seed sown compost. I think it was 25 litre bags. So £20.97. 7, add my 45 last week, so we're about 65, 60 this year. Sure, that'll only increase as the weeks go on, but I am, like I said, trying to budget this year, not being extravagant with any big plant purchases. It'll only be things that I really need. So if I've got seeds to grow, I do need some cost. Like I said earlier, using the same seed trays that I've used year after year. So that was Charlie's question. Now quickly go to YouTube. See if there are any questions there. Then the final place to check was Instagram. I posted a picture of a frog that was by our front door the other day. Under that was a question, I think. Let's have a look. So we've got a question from Beskelgler from the Netherlands. So hi if you're watching from the Netherlands. Question is, I have bought a Butia erispatha Sagres hybrid on a whim. Fantastic palm, I grow that in the garden. It should arrive next week. When do I plant it in its final spot and how do I give it the best head start? Thank you. So I've got this in the garden. I grew it in a pot for a few years before planting it out because I wanted it to get to a decent size to give it a decent chance of surviving because it's unknown hardiness really. It should be pretty hardy. I would expect it to be hardy to about -8 once it's established and it's to a big size. When it's smaller, it'll be less hardy. And because it's a hybrid, not really been grown and tested for many years, then the exact hardness is unknown. I've got it out in the garden. I planted it, I think, if you look back at the videos, it'll have been in sort of May, June time. So it's got through winter and spring, planted out when the soil is nice and warm. It allowed the roots to really get away, grow well, and establish in its first summer and autumn before it hits its first winter. Mine's going through its first winter right now. It's looking good. It's not spear pulled like my Butia Jabea cross, which goes by to it. So hopefully it'll get through. And even if it does spear pull, as long as it all doesn't, go sort of raw coloured, all the rest of the leaves, I think it will still recover and do fine. A few years to establish and get bigger, hardier. So yeah, I would not really fertilize it in its first year. As long as you've got decent soil that you're growing it in its final growing position, I will let the roots establish, find their own nutrients in there, and so you've got equal root growth to leaf growth. Or really, the roots will grow more, but it'll establish itself before the leaves grow. If you give it too much fertilizer, you might get extra leaf growth, but not really a lot of root growth. You want to let it just get on with itself the first year. Keep it well watered, obviously, especially in the spring and summer once you've planted it. A lot of water then, hold off the water over winter, and then in the following year, then you can start feeding. First year, I wouldn't really feed it, just let it establish it in the ground. That was those questions, and quickly check on Instagram because I think we had some questions on there. Find the picture of the frog. There was a question. So this question comes from Gardening at Wesley. And the question is about tropical plants in a border, full sun versus less sunny and partial shade. And how do you consider plants in full sun at the beginning of the season but are shaded out by taller plants later on in the year? So this is a really interesting question, not something I've really covered before. And that is a fact, with these big, quick growing annual plants, grow lots of leaves and lots of stem height really quickly. So we talked about the riciness. But the bananas and cannas that come from the ground each year are really tall, will shade out plants below. But at the start of the year, so now, April, May, when these plants have not really got into their full stride, other plants around them might be in full sun. And when we get to the height of summer, they might be swamped out or in dark shade in those areas. I would say grow shade tolerant plants around smaller shade tolerant plants around big, tall foliage plants that will tower above them. So, like I'm trying, there's the want some colour as well, then you can have some of the tobacco flowers which don't mind a bit of shade. Then you've got things like the coleus as well that don't mind too much shade. They do like sun as well, but they don't mind the shade because the foliage plants are not flowering plants. Normally, say plants want sun because they want them to flower and they flower better in shade generally for most plants. But things like begonias you can grow in shade as well. So you might sort of hold off planting them off and then plant them under your cannas, hinges and things like that. And you can grow true shade loving plants like ferns around the edges as well. You've got lots of different options depending if you want hardy plants or half hardy plants. But it is so tempting early in the year, in spring, to plant out plants too close together and not think about, how high they're going to get, how wide they're going to get, because you just see this bare earth and you want to cover it as quickly as possible with plants. You don't see all that earth, but it doesn't take long. It literally takes a matter of weeks between sort of May into June, and then as soon as you get into July, for plants to explode into growth. Where you might have had bare soil back in sort of early April, you've got absolutely no sign of that soil as you get to the height of summer. You've got plants crowding out if you plant them too close together. And that can be a nice look when you've got like a jungle feel, big enveloping around you, lots of lush foliage. But you might have to thin out plants because they might be pushing each other over, and then some plants will get totally swamped. And you might have, planted a plant and it looks beautiful back in April and May. As you get through summer, it might totally disappear. And you get to autumn, you're looking around the garden, and underneath plant that was looking fantastic in spring, early summer is looking sort of half dead, brushed by the foliage of other plants. You've really, planted it in the wrong spot. So be careful about the spacing of plants in spring and think about how all plants will grow together. Okay, we have gone over the hour. I will pick one more question. We'll call it a day, I think. Look, we have a question from, look, Cat One has a question about Tetrapanax, and it started pupping. How do we get rid of them without promoting new pups coming? Thanks. That is a good question. It's quite, I won't say it's an invasive plant, but it's definitely a plant that will grow large and it will pup if you disturb the roots. It grows new plants every time a root is cut, basically. Cut a root with a trowel or a fork or a spade, you normally get lots of new plants. And if it's damaged by frost really bad and it loses the growth point, it often causes it to grow lots of new plants from the roots as well as little side shoots on the main tree as well. So how do you get rid of them without promoting new pups? That's difficult. Like I said, as soon as you cut through a root, it will probably try to grow a plant from the edge and along the cut root. So if you don't want to kill the main plant, then it's basically keeping on top of the suckers that do come up and be wary of, like I said, planting, disturbing around that plant. So I wouldn't grow this in an area where you're constantly planting annuals around it every summer and spring because obviously you're disturbing the roots because the roots of Tetrapanax aren't very deep, they're pretty shallow on the whole, and it doesn't take much of a depth to dig and cut through those roots. So I would plant it somewhere where you're going to get permanent planting perennials around there. You're not going to be digging over the soil all the time. And you can dig them up when they're very small. They're not too hard to do. When they get bigger and start getting a woodier stem, then they're a bit tougher to dig up. And they will keep on coming, unfortunately. So it is a plant where, if you want it in your garden, you're going to have to deal with it in terms of keeping on top of the pups that keep coming. Sometimes you might be looking, not every single plant pups prolifically. Some hardly ever pup, and there's certain varieties that don't pup or very rarely pup at all. So look out for those. And a video on the different types of Tetrapanax and talk about the ones that pup a lot. Don't. Generally, most Tetrapanax pup heavily, keeping on top of them. So that was all the questions. Well, there's a few more, but like I said, I try to keep to an hour when I do these videos. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll probably do a few of the timestamps below, so you can go to questions you want. Day or so, you'll see that. So thank you for watching this live stream. Hope these question and answers have been informative and interesting. And if you enjoy looking at what seeds I'm going to attempt to grow this year for the garden, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.